They mocked me for years, until a courtroom revealed exactly who I am. So, last month, on a random Tuesday morning when I was barely awake and still smelling like leftover coffee, my phone lit up with a message from my nephew, Logan, and not a "Good morning, Aunt Hannah" type message. No, it was this. Need you to co-sign a loan. Going to get the car today. You're doing it. I stared at it like my phone had grown teeth. For a second, I honestly thought I was reading it wrong, because who talks to family like that? But the longer I looked, the more it felt like someone had shoved a thumb right into my chest. And what's wild is, I wasn't even surprised. Just tired. Bone-deep tired. The kind of tired you only get from being the responsible one your whole damn life. I used to think I'd gotten good at letting things slide. My brother Evan and his son had been living rent-free in a small apartment I'd bought years ago, back when I still believed temporary meant temporary. Back when I thought helping family was the same thing as doing the right thing. But messages like Logan's, they chipped away at something in me I didn't know was still fragile. And here's the part no one in my family knows, even after all these years. They think I'm just some overworked accountant who stays quiet because she doesn't know her worth. What they don't know is that 6 years ago, when the company I worked for was drowning, I bailed it out. I put my own savings into it, more than I've ever told anyone. And in return, I became a silent partner. I own half of it. Half. But I never told my family, because every time I tried to open up, it turned into them asking for something. A favor. Money. Just this once. So I shut that part of my life away, like a secret room no one got to touch. That morning, though, looking at that rude little text, I felt something shift, like a floorboard cracking under your feet. I walked into the company office pretending everything was normal, but my mind kept circling that message, replaying the tone, the entitlement, the audacity. It felt like every time I'd covered Evan's bills, every time I'd bought groceries for Logan, every time I'd been told, "You're the good one, Hannah, you'll understand," was suddenly stacking up behind me like a wall ready to collapse. I didn't answer the message right away. Honestly, I didn't trust myself not to scream. But Logan didn't wait. Not even 30 minutes later, he sent another message. "You ignoring me?" That one hit harder. Not because of what it said, but because of who he used to be. I used to babysit that boy. I taught him how to ride a bike. I held him the night he broke his arm jumping off the porch. I remember when he cried because his goldfish died. And now he was talking to me like I was some bank clerk he could bully. On my lunch break, I sat in my car behind the office, the winter sun spilling through the windshield. I could see my own reflection faintly in the glass. Tired eyes, messy bun, a jacket I should have replaced 2 winters ago. I whispered to myself, how did we even get here? I knew the answer. It didn't come all at once. It came in tiny moments. Times I said yes when I should have said no. Years of being the one who kept the family afloat after our parents died. Letting Evan move into the apartment for just a few months after he lost another job. Letting Logan stay after dropping out of college. Paying one electric bill, then the gas bill, then the internet, until eventually I couldn't tell where their lives ended and mine began. I guess I thought being patient made me a good person. And maybe it did. But patience becomes something uglier when people start treating it like a weakness, like an invitation. By the time I drove home that evening, I'd made a decision that felt strange, like trying on someone else's coat. I was done being the person they could drain whenever they wanted. But even with that decision boiling in my chest, a part of me still hoped Evan would call with some kind of explanation. Something that would make this whole day feel like a misunderstanding. And sure enough, he called, but not the way I hoped. The moment I picked up, he didn't even say hello. He went straight into, "Logan told me you're giving him attitude. Just sign the paperwork. Stop making things difficult." Difficult. That word hit me like a slap. I swallowed hard, steadying my voice the way people do right before they jump off something high. "I'm not co-signing anything," I said quietly. There was a pause. Then Evan laughed, this low, mocking sound that made my stomach twist. "Hannah, don't start. You know we need this. You know he needs this." "No," I repeated, "I'm not doing it." The air on the phone turned icy. "If you're not going to support family," he said. Then maybe you shouldn't call yourself part of this one. I didn't know how to respond. Not because I didn't have words. Oh, I had a lot of words. But because I finally saw it clearly. There was no love behind his voice. No gratitude. Just expectation. Like I wasn't a sister. I was a resource. That night, I sat at my tiny kitchen table with the lights off, just the hum of the fridge filling the silence. The world outside was quiet, but inside me something loud was happening. A realization. A small, sharp one. I wasn't losing them. I'd lost them a long time ago. And somehow that truth didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It felt freeing, like opening a window in a stuffy room. I didn't know it yet, but that was the beginning of everything changing. Fast. Faster than I could have imagined. And the people who thought they knew me best were about to realize they didn't know me at all. The day after I told Evan no, something in the air around me felt different, like the whole world had tilted by half an inch. I woke up earlier than usual, made coffee that somehow tasted stronger, and sat at the edge of my bed staring at the wall like I was waiting for someone to hand me instructions on what to do next. But nobody hands you anything in this life. Not instructions, not boundaries, not respect. You have to carve that out yourself. And apparently, it had taken me 36 years to figure that out. When I finally grabbed my phone, I already knew what I'd see. 3 missed calls from Evan, 2 from Logan, 1 from a random number I'm pretty sure belonged to Maddie, because the voicemail started with her trademark sigh, the one she used whenever she wanted attention. It was something between an annoyed exhale and a fake gasp. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I could practically hear the script. Hannah, this is unfair. You're overreacting. You know he needs this. And my personal favorite, family helps family, which, in their translation, really meant you exist to fix the problems we create. I wasn't in the mood, so I did something I never do. I shut my phone off. Not silent mode, not do not disturb, fully off, black screen, dead quiet, and God, that silence was addictive. I drove to work with the windows half open even though it was freezing, because the cold air made me feel awake in a way I hadn't felt in years. I kept thinking about all the ways I'd accidentally trained my family to see me as the designated problem solver. Like that Thanksgiving 3 years ago when Evan forgot to bring food for the potluck and blamed the grocery store for being too crowded, so I ended up cooking the entire meal while he watched football. Or when Logan accidentally overdrew his bank account and I covered it because he made me feel like I was kicking a puppy if I refused. It's wild how easy it is to convince yourself you're doing the right thing when deep down you're just avoiding conflict. Avoiding being the bad guy. Avoiding being called selfish. I walked into the office and our receptionist, Jen, looked at me the way people look at someone who shows up to work with a new tattoo or a dramatic haircut, half impressed, half confused. You look awake, she said, squinting. Weirdly awake. I laughed, shrugged, and said, Turns out turning your phone off makes you feel like you escaped prison. She snorted. Girl, I need to try that. That tiny moment, someone seeing me as more than the stressed-out accountant, felt like a warm hand on my shoulder. A small reminder that not everyone in my life expected me to bleed for them. My peace didn't last long, though. I was at my desk maybe 10 minutes before Evan stormed into the office. I didn't even hear him come in. I just looked up and there he was, standing in the doorway like he owned the place, wearing that same puffy jacket he's had since high school and carrying the same entitled energy that jacket somehow amplifies. We need to talk, he snapped. Not, hey, not, do you have a minute? Just immediate aggression. Classic Evan. I sighed and stood up slowly, like I was moving through molasses. Not here, I said. Actually, yes, here, he shot back. Because you're not answering your damn phone. A couple of employees looked over, not in a nosy way, more like in that, oh boy, something messy is happening way. I kept my voice low. Lower your voice, Evan. Don't tell me what to do, he said, instantly louder, like a child whose toy got taken away. I could feel my cheeks heating up, not from embarrassment, but from this cold, rising anger that tasted like metal in the back of my throat. "You didn't answer Logan," he continued. "He needs the car, Hannah. He starts work Monday." Now, this was a bold-faced lie. Logan hasn't worked a full week since 2019. I raised an eyebrow. "What job?" Evan blinked too fast. "You know, the thing. The warehouse." "Which warehouse?" I asked. Another blink. "The one off Maple Street." "There's no warehouse on Maple Street," I said, and for a second I thought he might actually trip over the amount of lying he was doing. He clenched his jaw. "Jesus, Hannah, why do you always make things so damn complicated? Can't you just help your nephew?" That was the moment something in me hardened, like wet cement finally drying. "I did," I said quietly. "For years." "Well, you didn't do a very good job, apparently," he muttered. That line hit different. It didn't hurt the way he meant it to. It clarified everything. It was the moment I knew I wasn't crazy for pulling away. I was right. Painfully right. "Evan," I said softly, "I'm not signing anything. Not now, not ever." He opened his mouth to yell again, but before he could, my boss, well, technically my business partner, though nobody except the owner and a lawyer knew that, walked into the hallway. "Everything okay here, Hannah?" he asked, not even looking at Evan. And I swear to God, the way Evan's face twitched when someone treated me, quiet little Hannah, like a valued person, it was delicious. "Yeah," I said. "We're done." Evan scoffed so loudly I'm pretty sure it echoed. Then he stormed out, muttering to himself about unbelievable betrayal, like we were in a soap opera. After he left, I sat back at my desk and breathed for what felt like the first time in years. It wasn't peace exactly, more like the calm before a storm I knew was coming. But it was also strength, quiet strength, the kind of strength you only get when you stop chasing approval from people who benefit from your silence. Later that night, I finally turned my phone back on. A flood of messages came in. Logan's were full of attitude. Maddie's were dripping with fake concern. Evan's were a mix of guilt trips and thinly veiled threats. But instead of panicking, I felt weirdly steady. Like, for once, I wasn't the one scrambling. I read each message slowly, breathing in deeply, letting the words settle. Then I did something I'd never done before. I screenshotted everything, every insult, every lie, every attempt at manipulation, every threat. I put them in a folder on my laptop and named it, just in case. And I swear, doing that felt like sharpening a blade I didn't know I was allowed to hold. Something big was coming. I could feel it in my bones. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of it. I was ready. I always thought people exaggerated when they said you could feel a breaking point coming like a cold front rolling in, but that week it felt exactly like that. Thick air, buzzing nerves, this quiet hum under my skin that told me something big was about to snap. And honestly, I was tired of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was ready to throw the damn shoe myself if I had to. The morning it all unraveled started out painfully normal. I was at my desk going through quarterly reports when my boss, Mark, knocked lightly on my door and said, "We need to talk, conference room." He didn't look angry, but he didn't look relaxed either, which is usually a sign something is about to go sideways. When I walked in, he slid a printed email across the table, the subject line loud and ridiculous. "Urgent HR complaint against Hannah Lane." My stomach dropped, but not because I was scared. No, it was the sheer stupidity of it that made my blood pressure spike. "I thought you should see this before HR starts asking questions," Mark said. "We already know it's garbage, but protocol is protocol." I braced myself and read it. And I swear, if stupidity had a scent, this email smelled like Axe body spray and desperation. It accused me of emotionally manipulating younger employees, publicly shaming a family member during work hours, and, my personal favorite, using financial leverage to create a hostile environment. It didn't list dates, or names, or witnesses, just pure, unfiltered chaos. And at the bottom, the line that gave it away. This woman thinks she's above consequences because she owns half the damn company. Only 3 people knew about that ownership. Mark, the lawyer who drafted the contract, and Evan, because he snooped through my mail one Thanksgiving while pretending to look for napkins. My jaw tightened. They sent this to the corporate inbox? He nodded. From an anonymous address, but it's written like someone who knows you personally. I let out a slow, bitter laugh. Oh, I know exactly who wrote it. And I did. I could see Evan's voice all over that email. Dramatic, messy, misspelled words he probably Googled, and this weird flair for victimhood that he treats like a personality trait. HR cleared me within a day. They've known me for years, and there wasn't a single believable detail in the whole thing. But the damage wasn't meant to be inside the company. They wanted noise, chaos, embarrassment. And they got worse than that. They got attention. Later that afternoon, our receptionist Jen leaned into my office with wide eyes. You might want to see this. She held up her phone, and on the screen was a burner Instagram account with my face plastered on a collage of photos, so badly edited, it looked like someone used Microsoft Paint during a power outage. The caption was even worse. Would you trust this woman with your money? They tagged the firm. They tagged half our clients. They even tagged a local Facebook moms group known for destroying people's reputations quicker than wildfire. My fingers tingled. Not from fear, from fury. But right as heat rushed through me, something unexpected happened. Mark walked into my office holding his own phone, raised an eyebrow and said, "Send me every screenshot. We'll let the cybersecurity team handle the rest." No judgment, no hesitation, just support. And weirdly, that steadied me more than anything else. Because the whole time my family treated me like a walking ATM with a pulse, these people, the ones who owed me nothing, were the ones standing beside me. I went home that night exhausted but wired, like my brain was running too hot. I sat at my kitchen table sorting every message, every threat, every screenshot into a neat evidence folder. I kept reminding myself, this is what boundaries look like. Messy, loud, ugly, but necessary. I don't know what I expected next, but I definitely didn't expect the knock on my door at 9:47 p.m. When I opened it, a woman I didn't recognize stood on my porch, early 30s, tired eyes, holding her phone like it weighed 10 pounds. "Are you Hannah?" she asked. "Yeah." "I'm Elise," she said. "I used to be friends with Maddie." Ah, the plot thickens. She exhaled sharply. "Look, I'm not here to cause drama, but you need to see something, and I need to get this off my conscience before I start drinking again." She came inside before I even processed what she said, and sat at my table like she'd been there 100 times. Then she opened her phone and showed me a group chat, the kind where people talk too freely because they think nobody will ever see it. Maddie bragging that she drafted the HR email. Logan saying he wanted me knocked down a peg. Evan telling them to make her look unstable so she'll cave. Elise kept scrolling. My hands shook, not because I was scared, but because none of them expected this to ever hit daylight. Then she played a voice memo. Maddie's voice filled the room, high-pitched, whiny, dripping with that weird pride she gets when she thinks she's being clever. Hannah thinks she's so above everyone because she has her own place and plays boss lady at her stupid accounting job. She needs a lesson. If HR doesn't bite, we'll make clients think she's a nutcase. And if she still doesn't break, well, there are other ways. Elise paused the audio. Silence swallowed the room. "I'm done with them," she said quietly. "I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up to ruin a woman who's literally done nothing but help them." I stared at her, speechless for once in my life. "Why are you showing me this?" She swallowed. "Because I got into AA last month. Step 9 is about making amends." She gave me a shaky half smile. So, yeah, this is me, making amends. When she left, I sat at the table in the dark for a long time, my heart beating slow but strong. See, up until that moment, everything had been noise, chaotic, painful noise. But that recording? That was the lightning strike, the thing that turns a storm into a wildfire. The next morning I called my attorney. A good one. The kind who doesn't blink when you say words like defamation, harassment, attempted reputational damage, and civil liability. I handed him everything, every screenshot, every message, every voice memo. He read in silence, eyebrows slowly rising to his hairline. Then he closed the folder and said, "They're going to regret this." And he was right. Because the moment we filed the suit, official, notarized, with exhibits attached, my family finally realized I wasn't bluffing. Evan got served while pumping gas. Logan got served at his girlfriend's townhouse. And Maddie? She got served at the diner where she works brunch shift, right in front of two regulars who gossip more than CNN. But the real show, the real twist, the moment everything blew wide open, didn't happen until the hearing, because they thought they could lie their way out. They thought they could play victims. They thought they could paint me as cold, selfish, cruel. They forgot one thing. I had receipts, and I wasn't scared to use them. The courtroom felt cold and dry, like a library with an attitude problem. They sat on one side, angry, disheveled, whispering frantically. I sat on the other, calm, tired, but steady. When the judge asked for evidence, my attorney didn't speak. He simply pressed play. Maddie's voice memo echoed through the entire room. If she still doesn't break, well, there are other ways. Evan's face went corpse white. Logan sank into his seat like he wanted to disappear. And everyone else in the courtroom? They froze. Because it wasn't just proof. It was confession. It was intent. It was the moment the judge looked at me, not with pity, but with respect. And something in my chest loosened. A knot I'd carried for years finally untying itself. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't the underdog in this story. Not anymore. I was the storm. And they had no idea what was coming next. I wish I could say that after the courtroom disaster, everyone quietly packed up their pride, apologized, and walked away like decent human beings. But no, people like Evan, Maddie, and Logan don't crumble gracefully. They collapse in slow motion, arms flailing, dragging anyone within 10 feet down with them. And honestly, watching them unravel felt like seeing a storm finally run out of thunder. You don't cheer, you just breathe. The week after the ruling was strange, not triumphant, just quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar, like waking up after years of sleeping with one eye open. I went back to work, sat at my desk, and for the first time in months, my inbox wasn't on fire. Mark leaned into my office one morning with 2 coffees and this tiny smirk. "I hear your fan club has gone radio silent," he joked. I snorted. Guess their PR budget dried up. But beneath the jokes was something softer, this unspoken relief that the chaos had finally stopped bleeding into the office. It made me realize how much I'd been trying to handle alone, acting like it was just a family issue, when really, it had been a whole hurricane. Meanwhile, the fallout hit my cousins like a boomerang. Logan tried to salvage his image first. He posted a long, rambling Facebook status about being misunderstood and standing up to toxic behavior, but people weren't buying it anymore. One of his old high school friends even commented, "Bro, you still owe me $60 from 2014. The post got deleted within the hour. Then came Maddie. She attempted the classic soft rebrand. New hair, new nails, new inspirational quotes on Instagram about growth. But everything collapsed when the diner she worked at fired her. Apparently, her little stunt had made its way to the owner's daughter, who was studying law and recognized Maddie's legal trouble immediately. Word travels fast in small towns, faster when it involves drama. I heard she spent 2 hours crying in the walk-in freezer before they let her go. And Evan, well, he went quiet. Too quiet. My aunt called one night, asking if I'd heard from him. He's been off, she whispered, voice shaking. I didn't know what to say. This was the same aunt who once told me, "Just let Evan stay with you a little longer. He needs guidance." Guidance. Right. More like a free housekeeper and emotional punching bag. But she sounded scared, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound like she was defending him. She sounded like someone who realized she'd been feeding a wolf thinking it was a house pet. I hope he gets help, I finally said. And I meant it. I didn't want revenge anymore. Not really. I just wanted peace. At the same time, something shifted in the family dynamic that I didn't see coming. My uncle, who had always stayed neutral to avoid family drama, showed up at my place with a grocery bag full of homemade chili, cornbread, and a six-pack of sparkling water. I know I should have said something earlier, he muttered, staring at the floor. But you didn't deserve any of that. None of it. I looked at him, this man who had always treated conflict like it was radioactive, and realized how heavy silence can be when you depend on it. We talked for hours, about boundaries, about old wounds, about how families can love you and hurt you at the same time. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it felt like a small stitch mending a torn seam. Sometimes healing isn't fireworks. Sometimes it's a bowl of chili and a quiet apology at your kitchen table. Around that time, Elise, the unexpected whistleblower, texted me out of the blue. "Hey, just wanted to check in. You okay?" It was strange how someone who barely knew me ended up being more supportive than people who shared my blood. We grabbed coffee one Saturday morning at a little cafe near the river. She looked healthier, clearer eyes, steadier voice. "AA's going good," she said. "Making amends sucks, though." I laughed. "Trust me, holding people accountable sucks too, so I guess we're both doing hard things." She smiled, and for a moment, I saw something like hope in her face. Not for me, for herself. And that made the whole mess feel a little less pointless. The lawsuit money, ironically, wasn't the part that changed things. It was what happened after. I used a small portion of the settlement to finally renovate the spare room in my house. The one I used to call the maybe someday office, but never touched because I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to think about the future. I painted it a warm clay color, added a huge reclaimed wood desk, hung soft lights around the windows. My therapist calls it Hannah's sanctuary. I call it my comeback room. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I was living in reaction to someone else's chaos. I felt like I was steering something. My own life, my own pace, my own damn decisions. Still, the strangest part wasn't the recovery, it was the ripple effect. People at work started opening up to me, not about office stuff, but about their families, their boundaries, their burnout. One coworker said, "Watching you stand up to them made me finally tell my brother to stop using my credit card." Another confessed she cut off her toxic ex after seeing how I handled mine. It blew my mind. I didn't think anyone had been paying attention, much less taking notes. But maybe that's how courage works. Quiet, contagious, invisible at first. You know what surprised me most, though? Evan never apologized. Not once. Not a text, not a letter, nothing. And for a minute, that bothered me. Not because I wanted his apology, I'd stopped wanting that years ago, but because it proved something I didn't want to admit. Some people aren't meant to grow with you. Some people aren't meant to understand the damage they cause. Some people aren't meant to stay. And that's okay. What mattered was that I wasn't carrying his weight anymore, or Maddie's, or Logan's, or anyone else's. One night, a few weeks after everything settled, I took a walk around my neighborhood. The air smelled like pine in early summer. Kids were riding scooters down the street, porch lights glowing warm behind screen doors, someone grilling burgers 2 houses down. And I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Light. Not happy, not excited, just light, unburdened. I realized I didn't need a perfect ending. I didn't need them to change or repent or suddenly see my worth. What I needed was exactly what I had now: distance, clarity, and a life that finally made room for me. That night, I stood in my backyard barefoot on the grass, looked up at the quiet sky, and whispered to myself, "This is what freedom feels like." And for once, the world felt like it whispered back, "You earned it." There's this quiet moment I keep coming back to, late one Sunday evening, lights low, my house finally calm, the dishwasher humming in the background like a white noise machine for grown-ups. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of mint tea, staring at the last of the legal paperwork my lawyer had sent over. Everything was done. Filed, closed, final. It should have felt like victory, like some big, "you did it" ending. And in a way, it did. But the emotion that washed over me wasn't triumph. It was this warm, grounded sense of finally being able to exhale after holding my breath for years. And weirdly, I think that's the part nobody warns you about. How freedom doesn't hit you like fireworks. It sneaks in like soft morning light, slow and steady, and suddenly you realize you're not scared anymore. I'd spent so long living on alert that I didn't even recognize stillness when it finally showed up. My therapist once told me, "Sometimes peace feels uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar." And yeah, she nailed it. For a while, I kept waiting for another crisis, another meltdown, another midnight phone call. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing came. No burner accounts, no smear campaigns, no threats, no chaos, just life. Quiet, ordinary life. And I didn't know how much I'd missed it until it came back. One afternoon, a coworker named Renee stopped by my office with a container of homemade lemon bars, warm, soft, dusted with powdered sugar, like something out of a Southern church bake sale. "Saw your light on," she said. "Thought you could use something sweet after everything." I laughed. "How'd you know I'm a lemon dessert person?" She grinned. "Girl, we've worked together 7 years. I've seen you inhale lemon pie at company potlucks." It was such a small exchange, but it stuck with me. Sometimes the universe doesn't send you grand rescues. It sends you lemon bars and people who noticed you even when you thought you were invisible. Around the same time, I cleaned out the last remains of Evan's junk from my garage. Half-broken furniture he swore he'd fix someday, 3 trash bags of clothes he stole from ex-girlfriends, and a box full of old participation trophies he'd been carrying around like proof he mattered. As I stacked everything by the curb, I felt this bizarre combination of sadness and clarity. Because the truth is, I didn't hate him. He wasn't a villain. He was a person shaped by choices, bad ones, over and over, until he became someone I couldn't help anymore. And letting go wasn't about punishing him. It was about choosing myself. Later that week, I got a message from the community center near my neighborhood. They were looking for volunteers to help adults with financial literacy, people trying to rebuild after bankruptcy, divorce, job loss. I stared at the email for a long time before hitting reply. Something in me knew I needed to do it. Maybe because I'd seen firsthand how money, or the lack of it, could twist families into knots. Maybe because I understood what it felt like to carry shame that wasn't yours. Or maybe because helping strangers felt easier than trying to fix the people who never wanted to be fixed. Either way, I signed up. That first evening at the center, standing in a classroom that smelled like dry erase markers and nervous hope, I felt something settle inside me. Purpose, maybe. But the biggest shift, the one that truly surprised me, came from my aunt. The one who had always defended Evan, always made excuses for his behavior, always called me too tough whenever I tried to set boundaries. She called out of nowhere, voice soft in a way I'd never heard before. "Hannah," she said, "I want you to know I'm proud of you." I froze. Not out of disbelief, but because it felt like hearing a song I'd forgotten existed. "I didn't understand before," she admitted, "but I see it now. You weren't punishing him. You were protecting yourself." There was a long pause, then she whispered, "I wish I'd learned that when I was your age." That night I cried. Not the devastated kind, but the kind that cleans something old and heavy off your chest. Because for once, someone in my family didn't twist the story. They saw the truth, and that truth wasn't about what I'd lost or what I'd fought. It was about who I'd become when everything else fell apart. Some people asked if I forgave Evan and the others. Honestly, forgiveness stopped being the goal. I didn't need it. What I needed was closure, and I found it. Not in their apologies, but in my own decision to finally stop shrinking to make others comfortable. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will be a quiet thing, slow like a sweater unraveling thread by thread. But it isn't something I owe them. The only person I owed anything to was myself. A few weekends later, I drove out to the lake, this quiet little spot my dad used to take me fishing when I was a kid. I sat on the dock, listening to water slap against the wood, and for the first time in forever, I felt proud. Not because I won anything, not because karma came through like some cosmic UPS delivery guy, but because I finally understood something I wish someone had told me years ago. Sometimes protecting your peace means letting people face the consequences of their own storms. Sometimes loving yourself means walking away, even when they swear you're the villain. Sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is say, "Enough, no more." And here's the part that surprised me the most. When you stop letting toxic people take pieces of you, you don't just become lighter, you become whole. So yeah, that's my story. Not perfect, not pretty, but real. And if anyone listening is stuck in the same kind of family disaster I clawed my way out of, here's what I'll tell you. The way a friend told me once when I needed it most. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to walk away. And you're allowed to build a life that feels like peace, no matter who doesn't like it. And when you finally do, it won't feel like revenge. It'll feel like freedom. When everything finally settled, I realized the real battle was never about the lawsuit, the shouting matches, or even the lies. They were just symptoms of a deeper truth I'd been too afraid to face. For years, I kept shrinking myself to keep the peace, thinking silence was safer than confrontation. But silence, I learned, can become its own kind of prison. And the longer you stay in it, the more you forget the sound of your own voice. Standing up wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who I was before the guilt, before the pressure, before the years of being told I owed everyone something. You can't pour from an empty cup. I'd heard that saying 100 times, but I never understood it until I finally stopped letting people dip into mine like it was bottomless. What surprised me most was how clarity changes everything. When you set boundaries, people either grow with you or fall away. And that's okay. Sometimes letting go is an act of love, just not the kind they expect. The truth is, you can forgive someone and still refuse to let them back in. You can wish them well without wishing them close. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's as small as choosing peace on a random Tuesday. So yeah, that's what I learned. That standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. And that the person you become on the other side, calmer, stronger, lighter, is worth every uncomfortable step. If this story sparked something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own experiences, drop a comment, hit like if it resonated, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story, full of twists, heart, and maybe a little justice. Wishing you peace, clarity, and the quiet kind of hope that stays long after the chaos fades.